Good morning, Hope Hub community, family, friends. I've got a selfie stick, Maddie. I thought I'd better let you know that I'm giving it a go. Actually, it's easier already, and then it's not so close to my face. Thank you, Maddie, who does our websites and everything for our just about to become charity. It's on the go. Today is a special topic, and I have had it on my heart. I have felt convicted. I have said that in time I would talk again. What's the word? I have felt compelled to discuss a very transparent 12 months. It probably should say trigger warning, because I've been to a couple of things where people have talked about stuff and didn't know exactly what they're going to say and ended up a bit sad. I am going to talk about part of the journey with Steve, cancer, death and God. So between all of that you might get a trigger, so I thought I'd better let you know. I've honestly sat with this topic for a couple of weeks. I feel I need to walk and talk it, because to get it out might be a bit challenging. And the reason I have felt compelled to say something is the amount of people who have spoke about their journey and how they've got through things that I have listened to on YouTube for the last sort of 12 months. Look, forever, but particularly the last 12 months is actually quite phenomenal. And the help, and there's a few, like there's stuff on being a widow, there's stuff on coping with grief, relationship stuff, that they've actually all been incredibly helpful. And my mind is pretty out there. Sorry to everybody who has to deal with my scattered brain. I'm taking steps to help with the scattered brain at the moment. But I don't know if this convo is going to be 5 minutes or 30 minutes. So it's up to you. But I am going to be a bit transparent, and I may have to sit for part of it if my arm gets sore. And I've got my selfie stick, which I can turn on and off, which is amazing. I can't believe that. I should have done that ages ago. Okay, so this day, 12 months ago, I had to take Steve to an appointment. He was having the final, he had a PET scan, and they knew, I think he'd had the PET scan today, and then today was the day that we found out he had cancer, fully had cancer, like they were pretty sure. And then tomorrow was the day that he had the gastrointestinal thingy where it could have been today actually. Anyway, it's irrelevant. Today, I was sitting in a cafe and I was eating while he was under the table, and the doctor rang and he said, I'm sorry, he has advanced stage 4 cancer. He has a 20 centimetre tumour on his esophagus, and he's riddled with it. And I just burst into tears, and it was a shock. It was like a physical shock. I just was incredibly unsure how to handle it. Amazingly, one of my friends rang literally 30 seconds later, and I just cried to her. But the doctor said to me, I need you to come into the hospital so that we can tell him together. And I'm like, good luck, he probably won't think he has cancer. In fact, his journey was, I'm not going to die, right up until the end. So he did process everything in denial. I don't know how that works, but anyway, it worked for him. So that was an incredible shock, a physical shock to my body, to my mind. I can't imagine. I imagine he went in denial because that's his way of dealing with shock. But that is where it landed. And then you go into the process of, I have to tell my children. So at that particular time, we were having some marital problems. So we had to decide how to tackle it with the kids. All marriages go through problems. Out of privacy for my kids and respect for him, that subject is off the table, but they were pretty big problems. And we decided to tell the kids together after George's birthday, because we were going to go out, but he couldn't eat really by this stage, and you knew it was pretty bad. So straight away they were going into chemo mode. I wanted to go natural because I prefer natural, but then you've got to balance everything out between natural and between modern medicine. I think there's a happy balance between the two if you allow it. So the chemo was coming up, and they knew his body was weak because he'd lost a dramatic amount of weight, and he needed to get an NG tube in, but he didn't, and he lost probably 6 kilos. Because you have to understand with cancer that not only is the body dealing with the lack of food, but it's dealing with the cancer actually eating the body out from the inside. So he was in effect starving to death, which was traumatic all by itself. Now, I'm going to swap over to this from that story to becoming a caregiver for 4.5 months, which I have to say is probably the most traumatic 4.5 months of my life. I have incredibly amazing friends who have supported me and loved me, new friends. Like, I just cannot thank them enough. They did name me Netflix though, naughty girls. So my nickname now is Netflix. So we always seem to find the funny side. So my first tip of the day would be try and find joy and fun no matter what, because without that, you need a special friend who used to be an emergency nurse, who has a bit of a dark humour, who can just laugh with you over stupid stuff that you should not be laughing at, basically. Right, so now I'm going to flip back to about 10-15 years ago, and I think this is why I'm feeling the need to discuss, and because of honestly the amazing people who have helped me through YouTube, and it's incredible. I'm really grateful to them. I might actually go through and list everyone, and not that I've got like an audience or anything, but I've done this maybe for myself to share with others. About 10 or 12 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I was in church. So firstly, I became a Christian 16 years ago. The people in my life who know me did actually have a full-on laugh that I've become a Christian, because I was like the least likely, or one of the least likely people to become a Christian. But I realise now that that's not exactly so. I'm like a prime candidate. So God got a hold of my heart. I had an encounter, you could say, and it wasn't actually at church. In fact, I had an encounter and I'd never even gone to church at that stage. And I did a deal. I said, if you do this, I promise I'll go to church forever. Not really thinking anything of it. But then it all happened, and it was quite a substantial deal, which I might talk about another time. But I remember saying, okay, I've got to go to church now. And Steve was like, well, I'm not going. You did the deal, not me. But I did, and it was life-changing, and I had a real encounter and became a Christian, and that's your journey to figure out. But I can only say it's probably the most powerful healing thing that's ever happened. So we're going back to probably about 4 years after becoming, so probably 12 years, I'd say. And at our church, we used to do these worship nights. And the worship night, this particular time, it was just singing, music, totally out of what normal people do, I must say. Like, if you weren't actually in church and you went to a worship night, you'd probably freak out. But it was probably one of the first times I'd ever done a whole night like that, and it was incredibly powerful. Whilst I was in that environment, I felt like I heard a voice. I'm not being kooky, because I know I'm not a kooky one. Well, I can be crazy, but not kooky. And the voice was, promise me. And I was like, what? And it was like, I'm like, who's speaking? And it was like, promise me. And it was like, promise me. And it was really deep, booming voice. And I was like, okay, all right, promise you what? And it was like, promise me you will stick with him where I take him and I'll deliver him. And I'm like, that is so weird. Anyway, I then got a feeling that it was a message for me. And then I saw a whole sort of vision, 10-year vision ahead, and it was about Steve. And I was like, okay, I promise you. And many, many times, like marriages do this. And there were times in my marriage which was really low, and I was like, oh, is this the time? Because I really don't want to be here. And then it would get better, and then this, and then this last season, we were having a really hard time in our marriage, and it was the same. I'm like, oh, is this the time? And it actually got extreme. And so I was like, okay, this is the time. And I thought, it doesn't feel like the time. Like what was going on in our marriage at the time, I was like, but it just doesn't feel like the time. But I did have to make some decisions. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is the time. Because it would just pop in my head every now and then. It wouldn't be something that I would think about until something major or something that it was beyond, in my own way, and beyond coping myself. And so I was like, nah, this is it. Anyway, so in this period, I was like, whatever, I'm going to make some decisions that work for me. And I was changing as well. So I was like, okay. And then 1 November happened. And I was like, this is what you're talking about. OMG. But even though I felt OMG, because like I'd never been around cancer or death or really anything. I lost one of my best friends very young in a car accident. But besides that, I'd never been close to death and dying. So I didn't really take it seriously. And then, but I knew. So the night before Steve told me he got some test results back, I had a dream as well. And God came to me in the dream and said, he has cancer and he's dying. And I was like, no. And I didn't really believe it, to tell you the truth, because you're like, how do you know if it's God or if it's just your subconscious? Like, let's be clear. Like, even as a Christian, you can't know sometimes whether it's God or whether it's subconscious, but it was God. Anyway, I felt like God had prepared my heart. So on that day, today, 12 months ago, I got the diagnosis from the doctor of Steve, and I felt in my spirit, in my heart, this is it. And at the beginning of the year before, the beginning of this year, because things were getting pretty bad. Obviously, he's growing cancer and there's life. And I was changing. So the beginning of the year, January, I got in the very similar thing in my spirit where God was, it's begun. And I was like, so I sort of knew, but I had no clue, let me tell you, what was coming. And I'm not laughing at that. That's just how I cope. I laugh. I go, that was really crazy. That moment that I found out was probably the most shocking moment at that stage. So there was plenty more to come after that. I knew I had to be there, and I knew we had to be together. And we didn't tell the kids for 2 weeks. The second shock was telling the kids and their faces, although one of them is probably a bit like me with dark humour and did make a comment like, so does that mean? And I'm like, oh goodness, you've got that humour. Not appropriate. But you know what? Sometimes we have to handle stuff the way we have to handle it. That's tip 2. People need to handle their shit the way they need to handle their shit, and there's no point judging them. You don't know if somebody is laughing away pain, because if they don't, they're going to cry for like 6 months. And you don't know if making a joke or a comment is a way of them processing the absolute bullshit going on in their life behind the scenes that you've got nothing to do with. It's just love people. That's it. Just go, okay, that's their journey. If you can't cope with it, take a step back. Like, people don't get offended. Like, just take a step back. It's pretty easy to do that. So that's number 2. So we had to tell the kids. So at this stage, Steve was talking and he was on his feet, and it wasn't going to last much longer like that. The doctor actually told me there's a good chance that he wouldn't be here by Christmas. So we're talking 1 November, so we're talking 6 weeks. He was just with chemo. I don't know if the chemo made it worse or better, but the chemo nearly killed him. And then I sort of was like, do you really ever want to do that thing again? Like, it's not worth it. And he didn't. His body could not cope with it. So the 12th of November was George's birthday, and we've got photos, and that's probably one of the last photos. And then we went out to dinner with people, and he didn't really eat. And that was a week later, and then he got the NG tube. That was the beginning of the most horrific 4 months. The NG tube saved him to a point, but it was a horrific saving, if that makes sense. And if I hadn't have had that vision, that word from God, that stick with him, so deliver him, for those who aren't in the Christian world, it just means he'll get his own encounter with God. I was sort of hoping that would happen while he was alive so that we could do everything together. It actually happened 5 days before. And you could see the change. When someone has an encounter, which if you want it, you pray God, you just ask Jesus to come into your heart and he will give you the encounter. If you want it, ask and you'll get it. And the softness in him, I knew. He changed within 5 minutes of having the encounter. And then I knew that he was off to heaven. So that is my belief, and through what I've been through, I don't think anything could change that. I don't like to put that out there because there is good and dark, and there is God and there is the devil, and saying that. But I feel like, I don't know, it's pretty tested. Been pretty tested over the past 12 months. My circumstances are different and complicated, and it's a challenge. Life is a challenge before, but gosh, this is the most challenging season. I don't say season because it's going to go. It's going to go. Part of it has gone. Some of it has gone. But anyway, let's not go too far ahead. So we did George's birthday. Then we did a dinner. And then we had the NG tube. I would have physical reactions to things. And so I had a physical reaction to the telling. I had a physical reaction to telling the kids, like I get shaky body, the whole thing. I had a physical reaction to when he got the NG tube. I walked in, because he's a very big, powerful man, and he was getting skinnier, and then to have a tube in, it was like, and that's why he made the decision no one was going to see him like that, because he was a big, powerful person and very, very full of pride. So I imagine a person, so you've got that type of person who deals with things, I'm just turning around for the lights better, that type of person who deals with things. And then you've got the other type who's fully open. Totally opposite. I would have been fully open and you all would have been in my bedroom probably. So I don't know, but I imagine that's how I would cope if, God forbid, I ever had to deal with it. It was horrific. That is the only words. So the esophageal cancer sucks the esophagus. And when the tumour's 20 centimetres, plus he had it all through the lymph nodes, they can't eat. There was no possible way of getting enough food into his body. The speed the cancer was going as well as. So he was starving to death. And as a family, we were watching it. I had another house and I said to the kids, we can go there, you come back and forth. But God loved my kids. Every single one of them wanted to be a part of it. I had to remove one of them towards the end because she was cracking up. But we all stayed together as a family. Do I recommend that? It's each to their own. The one thing I have learned is if there's any form of judgment that I've ever had towards anyone about anything, I just can't. Because you don't know how you're going to react to stuff. You literally, that saying, this is probably the first time in my life, the saying, you don't know what someone's going through until you walk in their shoes. I actually, so many things since then, decisions I've made, ways I've reacted, I just am like, until you're in my shoes, I don't give a shit. So it's like, you've just got to walk in someone else's shoes. The funny thing is, somebody's life is always worse. Like sometimes when I'm having my most down days, I will meet someone or I'll hear something and I think, oh my gosh, like, and it is true, God never gives you more than you can handle. I have to admit, I was close to the line. And I am so grateful that I have angels around me who have pulled me back from the edge. Community is so powerful. That is, you know, when we started Hope Hub Community, I had no idea really why. I just knew that we need to create community. We need to teach people about community. And me, Janine, Gabby and Catherine, who run Hope Hub Community, we can't be everybody's community, but we can show you how community works. And oh my gosh, these girls surrounded me like a little, and my other girlfriends and boyfriends, male friends, the support and love and family is just amazing. And the power of community, that's number 3, is absolute. We need community. God created community. It's actually, do not forsake the gathering. Do not forsake, like that is a sort of a command for believers, but it's a command for life. You need people. You need people. People need people. If you think you don't, you just need to go through hardship. Your circle could be little or it could be big. Doesn't matter, but you need people. Isolation, it is a killer. Right, so we're getting on to the next stage. The smell. We'll call this the smell. The cancer smell. I didn't know there was such a thing as a cancer smell, but there's a cancer smell. And one day, Steve had gone to hospital. So in this time, the 4 months, like I'm being very brief on his part because he is private and I know he's up there and he probably wouldn't care now, but I still want to not be too detailed. The smell of cancer is a smell that I actually don't think I could forget. And in fact, just this week, both Samantha and myself smelt it and both of us had a physical reaction. So she seems to be the most in sync with me with stuff, with the trauma. So the cancer smell. So I was driving home. I had one child who will remain nameless, not coping. That's the best way to describe it. In my ear, and I pulled the car over. She had her friend in the car and I got out of the car and I was on the road heading to our place, and I was like, I'm either going to hit a tree to stop the noise, or I am going to have an accident or something. I was just like, if I don't get out of the car, there's going to be a major issue going on. So I pulled over and I said, you girls can find your own way home. Although they hassle me about it because they're like, oh, you left us on the side of the road. I'm like, oh my gosh, you like ride bikes on that side of the road and walk. And anyway, that's teenagers. So I walked. I thought I just had to walk, and I started crying, and I was just crying and crying and crying. And then I saw the sign to the pub. And I did make a decision not to drink too much at that stage. Afterwards, I may have got into it a little bit, but it's stopped now. But I did make a decision not to drink too much because I knew that I didn't want to not be present. Tip 4, don't drink too much. Ruins your life. So I walked to the pub and I was crying, and I walked up to the bar. God knows what they were thinking. I need a glass of wine. And I'm like, a big one. And so I walked into a corner. I've turned my phone off because I was just like, I can't deal with people. Anyway, my beautiful friend Janine, eventually, she saw my car on the side of the road, and she obviously knows me very well. I do not go to the pub ever, but obviously I think I might have mentioned I need a drink or something. And anyway, so she's found me at the pub, and I was inebriated and I was crying. I could not stop crying. I couldn't stop. It was like that horrible messy, awesome cry that clears everything out, but is just embarrassing. Anyway, I'm cry. And then she calls my brother. So the two helpers, Janine and my brother, proceed to get inebriated with me. So good job. And then eventually I went home. There's probably more to that. I just can't remember it. I was inebriated. But that cry came from the smell. Steve was in hospital. They said they were going to try and keep him a few days. One, to give me a break. Two, because his blood pressure would get to like 60/40, and then he couldn't stand up, and it was problematic at home. So, that's right. So Janine is like on the phone. We need her house cleaned, because I'm like, I can't go home. I can't do the smell. It's not funny. I know I'm laughing. It is not funny. It is very traumatic. Like, I think I just cope with trauma with a smile. It was traumatic. I could not go home. But the girls who cleaned my house, Janine got onto them, and they all got around and they cleaned it, and they just got a fresh smell. And then Steve came home, and we proceeded to care and look after him. And you know what? He was amazing. Denial, as hard as denial is to live with going through cancer or someone dying, the good part about it is they shut down. He was also on morphine, so that probably helped. But he did shut down. So it's good, bad. I don't know the answer to that. All I know is he handled it like a trooper, and he made it easier. If it was much harder than what it was, I don't think I would have coped to the end. Right, so then we're moving forward. I told you it could be long. Get a cuppa if you haven't already got one. I haven't finished yet. I still feel the need. I have to finish this, and I did pray to God that I do it in one go, because I do not want to repeat it. It would have been much better if I'd had notes, but I can't walk with notes and a selfie stick. That is definitely helping. Thanks, Maddie. Okay, so things did progress. It got worse and worse and worse, and I had to deal with his mum coming down, and I can't even imagine what she must have felt. It's her son, but she can't hear properly. She's half blind. Her emotions are very, very raw. She's probably a bit like me, and so we are a bit emotional people. Like, everyone knows our emotions, the whole world. But I couldn't cope with her, so I did have to send her home. And I felt really bad about it, but I had to deal with my own kids and what they were going through. And they were watching this. They are the most amazing children. Like, the night that I got fully inebriated, my son gave me the biggest bear hug. And because I was like, my biggest heartbreak, I guess, is my kids are growing up without their father. That is what brings me to my knees. To lose your father at such a young age. It doesn't matter whether we are good parents, bad parents, whatever. Kids love us. We can put our kids on drugs and they love us. We can beat them and they love us. Like, eventually as adults, if you are completely toxic, it is up to them, and they do need to cut you off. But it's up to you not to be toxic, I guess. And for my kids to grow up without their father, it brings me to my knees. I just can't overthink that. I have to just put them on pause. And our mission is, let's just cope and let's just step forward. I say to them, look for a positive and move past the negative. Feel the pain. You've got to feel the pain. That's whatever I'm up to. 5, you've got to feel the pain. You got to feel it and then deal with it. Feel it and deal with it, and then move forward through it. It's okay to have joy and sadness all on the same day, sometimes in the same minute. I do that. The people who are in my life, I think they're very tolerant. So thank you, everybody. I am very emotional. Always have been, always will be. But this season, I'm erratically emotional. So that's the next thing. I'm erratic. I've gone off my medication. I've just got back on it. I've been on antidepressants on and off. Hadn't been on for 15 years until a couple of years ago. So I went off them. But I'm actually on them because it calms my mind. I actually don't have depression, anxiety. I have severe ADHD, I think. I don't know. I've been diagnosed a few times. Anyway, it's not about that. that could be another topic if I keep going. Okay, so the cancer journey, it got worse and it got harder, and there was a lot of falls. I'm not going to go too deep because I'm nearly finished. There was a lot of falls. There was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of tears from me, one of the kids, all of us really, but in different ways. And it just got harder and harder and harder. Every weekend got to a point where we were cringing, because usually on the weekend, for some reason, on the weekend, Steve would end up in hospital or an incident would happen. And towards the end, they weren't sure if he would live. I had to go, another confronting thing was I had to go and get a intent to die at home letter, so that if he did die at home, I wouldn't be have to go through the ambulances. After being in hospital, so he went to hospital 10 times, I think I told you. So the last time was palliative. So 9 times for low blood pressure, and they would juice him up, as he'd say, juice me up and send me home. And then while we were at the hospital, my goal was, I was like, you treat this man with dignity. You treat him with dignity. Because the nurses, the nurses are amazing. This is not a criticism for 1 second. They are busy. They're understaffed. So it's up to us to remind them, I suppose. And I don't mean that in a remind them in a bad way, but I would say, please treat him with dignity. And then they would rip his cannulas out too much, or they'd too quickly, and hurt him. And because he was very, very sensitive skin-wise. And so I'd say, be gentle, here's the cream. So I'd have my own sticky cream, take the cream, use the cream to get it all off. And they'd use it. And they'd have their own cream anyway. They just wouldn't think because they're in a hurry. And God love them. I love them all. No complaints. I'm going to say that again because I'd never want it to be critical. Without these beautiful doctors, nurses, everybody. Like, you know what? I am very, very into natural medicine and things like that. But there is a balance. And not every doctor is bad. Not every... Anyway, that's a little hobby horse of mine. So I would be there and I would be like, okay, come on. And then, so Steve got to a point, because he couldn't speak that well towards the end because it hurt a lot as well. So he'd be like, do your thing. And I know do your thing was calm the nurses down, get the medication right. So I knew what he needed to take when he went into hospital. By the 9th time, we'd sort of had it down pat. So it was very, very tricky. It was very, very tricky for him, for the nurses. He didn't want to be there. He wasn't the greatest patient. If you all know him, you can imagine that being in hospital was not his thing. So in the end, we decided not to do ambulances because that was actually more traumatic for me. But sometimes on the weekend, the only way to get through is through emergency. He would pass out getting out of the car, so I bought a wheelchair to put him in. And so I could, because I couldn't get, sometimes actually in emergency, they wouldn't have any wheelchairs. So in the end, I'm like, I'll just freaking buy a wheelchair. I'll just take my own if this is going to keep going on like this. So it is being practical as well. Like, you're dealing with someone, but you also need to look after yourself and be practical. And so for me to look after myself through this season, I had our Hope Hub community. And I would go every Tuesday. And the girl's like, yeah, it's amazing that you're here. And I'm like, it was like a mental day off from all the other stuff. And because Steve refused nurses, I put cameras in the house so that it would alert me if he fell over and things like that. I guess the point of sharing this up to this point, which I probably might stop here, is life sucks sometimes. And the amount of people, as I said earlier on, who have helped me through just talking about their journey and knowing that you can get through it, I think that's what it is. I am traumatised. I'm traumatised. I have trauma. That's probably, my kids are traumatised. The funniest thing is Sam and I get the same trauma each time. And what I realise is where I've had trauma was the physical reaction I might have had through this. I'd have a physical, so the first time I saw them, I had to take help with getting him on he had radiation. and it was the first time I'd seen his back, and I was like, shh, oh my God. But it wasn't, I don't know what it was, because you see them and you see them get skinnier and all of that, but it was like the spine, and I was like, oh. But so now skinny, I can't do skinny, and my mother, sorry Mum if you ever watch this, is skinny, and I find it really hard. And so the first time I hugged my mum when she's really skinny, I had a physical reaction, and then I've had to go lay down, and I feel like I'm passing out. And so yesterday, I again with my mother, I had to take her just for a CT scan, and they put a cannula in. So I had a physical reaction, and then I had to lay down. So I'm dealing with the trauma of it. Sam had the same reaction yesterday. It's just so funny. Hers was different, but the same. My mum, sorry Mum, was getting out of the car, because Sam actually was with Steve twice when he fell. So, and one of them was quite bad. So she said that she saw Nan and thought, oh, Nan's going to fall out of the car. So she got the same physical reaction, had to go lay down. So what we do is we've worked out, we just lay down, sleep it off, and then get on with it. But it's horrendous. It's awful. And you can't control it. Yesterday I didn't have a mental reaction. Like the first time I had a reaction, I was somewhere and it was a trigger, and it was a mental as well. I could feel it, and then I had the physical reaction, and then I had to lay down. I just realised I just need to have a few hours to just go. Another time was on Monday. I'm changing our bedroom because all the advice is to change stuff. And so I just wasn't going to remove any more of the clothes or anything, but I did. But when I picked something up, I could smell, and I was like, oh, and then so I ran out and I started crying. Your trauma is a funny thing. I'm learning about it. But the thing is, I get counselling. I've got a brilliant psychologist. I work my way through it. And I'm erratic, and I have really good people. Again, really good people. So my last thing is get help. Get the right people, get professionals who know what they're talking about around you. Because the amount of times I have been put on track, like the right track with stuff that I'm dealing with, is quite phenomenal. You need the right help from the right people, and you have to be careful, because if you get the wrong people, it can cause you major issues. So you've got to be picky. Be really picky about the professional help you get. Like, I am a Christian, so I want a Christian psychologist or counsellor, because I believe in the power of healing. And I have felt my heart. I have, through the power of prayer, through worship, through friendships and love, I am getting a heart healing. And through professional help to help me guide me into the right path. I am getting professional help. It does help. I am getting people help. It does help. You have to get help. You cannot get through trauma without help. So, I have done it, and I've done it in one take. Thank God, because I did think if I don't do it in one take, then I will have to sit at my desk and do it, and then I had to put makeup on, and there's no way you're getting in that light without looking. In fact, one of my friends says to me, I don't know how you do that without makeup. I don't know if that's an insult or if that's a compliment. But anyway, I'm not doing makeup at this time of the morning. And thank you so much. If you actually got to the end of this, thank you so much for listening. I don't know why, but I know I had to share this, and it may be just for one person, and if it is, God bless you, because life is shit sometimes, and we do need whatever help we can get. So the smile doesn't always convey the hurt heart. I can just see, I haven't even got my glasses on, I can see myself smiling. My heart hurts on and off, but I have the best way to describe this season, which I may still keep sharing, but certainly not this long. It's a clash of the pain of the past and the joy of the future. It's like it's an intermingled clash now. and walking with my mistakes and walking with my achievements. I've made a lot of mistakes with my kids. I've made a lot of mistakes in this season, in every season actually. But I know that, one, I have a good God who can turn all things to good to those according to his purpose. He can turn all things to good. So I know that. I trust that. I have faith in that. And I know that we're going to get through it as a family. And I just wanted to share that. See ya. I can use my button. Maddie, I'm using my button on my selfie stick. That didn't work.